Anthony Floyd Waywright was born in 1971. Not much is known about his childhood, but by the time he was 23, he was already behind bars in North Carolina. Then came April 23, 1994. Waywright escaped. He wasn't alone. Another inmate, Richard Hamilton, broke out with him. 4 days later, the two men made it to Lake City, Florida. That's where they saw her. Carmen Gayhart. Just 23 years old. A mother of two. Known for her kindness. Known for how deeply she loved her kids. She was in the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie grocery store. Waywright and Hamilton forced Carmen into her own car. They had a weapon and made her drive. They took her to a remote area in Hamilton County. There, they forced themselves on her and ended her life. Her body was later found in a wooded area. It showed signs that she had been hurt badly, both physically and in other harmful ways. No one knows exactly why Waywright and Hamilton did this, but many believe they were acting out of desperation. They had just escaped from prison and were likely trying to avoid getting caught again. After this, they left Florida. They ended up in Mississippi. There, a state trooper named John Wayne Leggett spotted them. A confrontation happened, and there was an exchange of gunfire. Both men were caught and later brought back to Florida to face legal consequences. In June 1995, Waywright was found guilty. The charges included harming someone in a fatal way, forcing someone to go with them against their will while armed, taking personal belongings using a weapon, and committing a forced act. He was sentenced to capital punishment in Florida. Hamilton received the same sentence. He later passed away while still in prison in 2023. Over the years, Waywright tried to appeal his case. He claimed his lawyer hadn't done a good job. He also pointed to new DNA evidence, hoping it would change the outcome. But each time, the courts decided the original verdict should stay. In July 2023, the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals said the new DNA evidence wasn't strong enough to change the decision. Then in April 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court chose not to take on his final appeal. Some people believe Waywright didn't get proper legal help during his trial. His lawyer only called one witness during the sentencing part and didn't share important background information that could have helped. Also, because of a missed deadline, a federal court never reviewed his sentence. On May 10, 2025, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a document that scheduled the final punishment for Waywright. The date was set for June 10, 2025, at 6 p.m. It was the sixth time Florida carried out such a sentence in 2025. Advocacy groups tried to stop it. They raised concerns about whether his trial had been fair. But on May 29, 2025, the Florida Supreme Court rejected a last-minute appeal. The next victim was found on the kitchen floor, but what led up to that moment is even harder to process. Gregory Hunt was born in 1960. There is very little information available about his early life. But what we do know is that by 1988, he was living in Cordova, Alabama, and had been dating a woman named Karen Lane for about a month. On August 2, 1988, 29-year-old Karen Lane was found unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. She lived there with a roommate. The night before, neighbors reported hearing shouting and crashing sounds coming from the apartment. One person said they saw Hunt breaking in through a window. Another recalled Hunt chasing Karen's car through town earlier that night. An autopsy showed that she had been targeted around 60 times. Around 20 of those injuries were to her head. She also had fractured ribs, a torn aorta, and damage to several internal organs. A red-stained bar stool and a broomstick were both found near her body. Medical examiners found signs that she had experienced forced physical contact. DNA was discovered in her mouth. Her arms showed signs that she had tried to fight back. Investigators also found Hunt's red palm print on the stairs and his fingerprints on a window screen at the back of the apartment. In 1990, Hunt was found guilty on 3 serious charges. One was related to taking Karen's life during what appeared to be a forced break-in. The other 2 charges were linked to the forced physical contact. A jury of 12 people voted on his punishment. 11 of them chose the maximum punishment under Alabama law. The court followed that recommendation. Over time, Hunt tried to challenge his sentence. He said his lawyers didn't bring up enough details from his background that might have helped his case. He also said that the physical contact had not happened in the way prosecutors described. But every time he appealed, the courts disagreed and denied his requests. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey had approved a 30-hour window for the sentence to be carried out. That time frame began at midnight on Tuesday, June 10, 2025, and ended at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, June 11, 2025. The procedure took place at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. Hunt chose a method called nitrogen hypoxia. This involves breathing in pure nitrogen gas, which slowly removes oxygen from the body. This causes the person to pass away through a lack of oxygen. Some say the next man made a choice. Others say he didn't stand a chance. George John Hansen was born in 1964. He had a difficult childhood. His lawyers have said that he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD. They believe this may have played a role in his behavior and made him more likely to be influenced by others. There isn't much public information about his family, but his defense team said he was often manipulated by people with stronger personalities, especially Victor Miller, who was involved in the same case. In August 1999, Hansen and Miller went on a violent spree in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They took 77-year-old Mary Bowles and her vehicle from a shopping mall parking lot. They forced her into the car and drove to a remote gravel area near Owasso. There, the property owner Gerald Max Thurman saw them and approached the group. Miller used a weapon and ended Thurman's life. After that, Hansen used a weapon as well and ended Mary Bowles' life. Many people asked why Hansen used a weapon on Bowles after Miller had already hurt someone. Prosecutors said that Hansen was fully involved and made his own choice, but his defense team claimed that Miller controlled the situation and pressured Hansen to act. Hansen was later found guilty in Oklahoma for what happened to Mary Bowles. He was given capital punishment. Victor Miller, his co-defendant, was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of release. Hansen's lawyers tried to appeal many times. They argued that he wasn't the one who ended Bowles' life, and that his ASD diagnosis should have been taken into account during his sentencing. They also said the event took place on Cherokee Nation land. Since Hansen was a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation, they believed the state didn't have the right to punish him under Oklahoma law. However, all of these appeals were denied. Hansen spent many years in a federal prison in Louisiana. He was there serving a separate sentence for unrelated federal offenses. In 2025, a change in national policy encouraged stronger enforcement of the highest level punishments. Following that, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi approved Hansen's transfer back to Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals scheduled his punishment to be carried out on June 12, 2025. On May 7, 2025, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board held a clemency hearing for Hansen. His lawyers again pointed to his ASD diagnosis and his behavior during his time in prison. They said he had been respectful, cooperative, and helpful for over 20 years. Prison staff testified on his behalf. They described Hansen as someone who followed the rules and treated others well. Hansen also spoke to the board. He said he felt deep regret. "I'm not an evil person. I was caught in a situation I couldn't control. I can't change the past, but I would if I could." Despite these efforts, the board voted 3-2 against recommending clemency. Without their support, Governor Kevin Stitt could not change Hansen's sentence to life without parole. On June 12, 2025, George's sentence was carried out by lethal injection. The next individual wrote a book about life behind bars. But no one predicted how he'd get there. Again. Stephen Christopher Stanko was born on January 13, 1968. He was born at the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba. Not much is known about his early life, but his trouble with the law began in the mid-1990s. In 1996, he was found guilty of physically harming someone and forcing them to go with him against their will. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. While serving time, he co-wrote a book called Living in Prison, a history of the correctional system with an insider's view. It reflected his interest in the prison system and may have been an attempt to improve his image. After being released in 2004, Stano moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He rented a room and told his landlady about his past. He kept a low profile and found it hard to get a stable job. He often said that his record made it difficult for him to be hired. After nearly a year, he moved in with a friend to help take care of her elderly mother. In April 2005, everything changed. Stano went on an aggressive spree that took 2 innocent lives and 1 seriously hurt. He had started a relationship with Laura Ling, a librarian he met while researching for a second book. On April 8, 2005, Stano ended her life by cutting off her air supply inside her home in Georgetown County. He then targeted her teenage daughter in a physical and harmful way. He attempted to harm her by targeting her neck. She was seriously injured but survived. Despite her injuries, she was able to call 911 and gave officers important details about what had happened. Later that same day, Stano visited Henry Turner. Turner was a friend he had met at the library. Stano told Turner that his father had recently passed away. He used this story as an excuse to enter Turner's home. Once inside, Stano used a pillow to muffle the sound as he shot Turner twice. He then took Turner's truck and used his banking information to take out money for his getaway. Stano then traveled to Augusta, Georgia. This was during the Masters tournament, so it was easy to blend in with the crowd. He met a woman at church and stayed at her home for a short time. He lied to her and claimed that he owned several Hooters restaurants. But the woman later recognized him from news coverage and contacted authorities. On April 12, 2005, U.S. Marshals found and arrested Stano. He did not resist. He was put on trial twice. One trial was for what happened to Laura Ling and her daughter. The other was for what happened to Henry Turner. In both trials, he said he wasn't fully responsible for his actions. He claimed that a problem in his brain made it hard for him to control his behavior or feel for others. But the juries in both cases did not believe that this explained his actions. He was found guilty of ending Laura Ling's life and severely harming her daughter. He was given the most severe sentence allowed, along with 110 additional years for related charges. In a separate trial, he was also found guilty of taking Henry Turner's life, and was given the same severe sentence again. Stano's legal team tried to appeal the decisions. They argued that his lawyers had not done their jobs properly and had failed to present important information that could have helped him. They also said that his lawyer had a conflict of interest. Despite these claims, the courts decided to keep the original rulings in place. At first, Stano considered choosing the firing squad as his method of execution, but in April 2025, he changed his mind. Another man named Mikhail Mahdi had gone through the same method, and it did not go as planned. Witnesses said Mahdi's final moments were prolonged and painful because some of the shots missed their mark. This incident made Stano worried that he might face the same situation, so instead, he chose to receive a fatal injection. This method also has its own problems, including reports of the person feeling as if they are drowning. His sentence was carried out on June 13, 2025. But how did a night of partying turn into one of Florida's most haunting cases? Thomas Lee Gudinas was born in 1973. There isn't much public information available about his early years. By the early 1990s, he was living in Orlando, Florida. He shared an apartment with a few other people. According to them, he often went out to local bars. He was also a heavy drinker and substance user. On the night of May 23, 1994, 31-year-old Michelle McGrath went to a nightclub in downtown Orlando called Barbarella's. She was last seen leaving the club alone around 2:45 a.m. The next morning, her body was found in an alley next to Pace School. She had experienced severe injuries to her head. There were signs that she had been harmed in an extremely disturbing way. Investigators also found bite marks and evidence that foreign objects had been used to hurt her. Her arms showed signs that she had tried to fight back. Several witnesses helped move the investigation forward. One schoolworker said he saw a man running from the alley where Michelle was found. That man was later identified as Thomas Gudinas. Another witness, a woman named Rochelle Smith, shared a story from that same night. She said a man tried to force himself on her in the parking lot of Barbarella's. She managed to get away and later picked Gudinas from a photo lineup. His roommates also gave important information. They said Gudinas didn't come home with them after the night at the bar. When he did return the next day, they noticed red stains on his underwear and scratches on his hands. One of the roommates said Gudinas made a disturbing comment. He claimed he had been with the woman even after she had passed away. In May 1995, a jury found Gudinas guilty of several serious offenses. These included taking a life, 2 instances of forced contact, 1 attempt at forced contact, and trying to break into a home while hurting someone. The evidence was strong. Witnesses and forensic details supported the case. The defense wasn't able to raise enough doubt. The sentencing court found multiple aggravating factors, including the heinous, atrocious, or cruel nature of his actions. The court noted that the victim suffered severe trauma and that the injuries were inflicted while she was still alive, indicating prolonged suffering. After his conviction, Gudinas was sentenced to the most severe punishment allowed under Florida law. Gudinas tried many times to fight his conviction and sentence, but every appeal was denied. In May 2025, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a final order. His sentence was carried out on June 24, 2025, at 6 p.m. Now, can one terrible decision erase a lifetime of discipline and service? Richard Gerald Jordan was born on May 25, 1946, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He grew up in the nearby town of Petal. People who knew him described him as a respectful and well-behaved kid. He also did well in school. After finishing high school at Petal High, Jordan joined the U.S. Army. He served during the Vietnam War. When he returned, he got married and became a father to 3 children. He worked several different jobs over the years. At one point, he managed a fertilizer plant. He also worked in a shipyard located in Morgan City, Louisiana. By early 1976, things were going badly for Jordan. He had lost his job and was under serious financial pressure. He became desperate and came up with a plan. He decided to take someone from a wealthy family and demand money in exchange for their return. On January 12, 1976, Jordan drove from Louisiana to Gulfport, Mississippi. He went there with the goal of forcing someone to go with him. He called Gulf National Bank and asked to speak with someone in charge of commercial loans. That's how he learned about Charles Chuck Martyr, who worked in that position. Using a phone book, Jordan found the Martyr family's home address. He went to the Martyr house pretending to be an employee from the local electric company. He told Edwina Martyr, Charles's wife, that he needed to check their circuit breakers. She let him in. Once inside, he forced her to leave with him. Their 3-year-old son was asleep in the house at the time. Their older son, who was 9, was in catechism class. Jordan made Edwina drive with him to the DeSoto National Forest. While they were there, he used a firearm and ended her life with a single shot to the head. Jordan later said he never planned for things to end that way. He claimed he had only meant to scare her when she tried to run. But the evidence showed something different. It showed she had been shot at close range while kneeling. Afterward, Jordan called Charles Martyr and pretended Edwina was still alive. He demanded $25,000 and told Charles where to leave the money, on top of a jacket by the side of Interstate 10. Jordan planned to collect the money later, but his plan didn't work. He was caught the very next day, on January 13, 1976. He was found guilty of taking someone's life where the victim had been taken against their will. In 1976, he was sentenced to the highest penalty allowed at the time. But that sentence was later overturned. The U.S. Supreme Court had ruled that automatic capital punishments were no longer allowed. Jordan was sentenced again in 1977, but that sentence was also thrown out for legal reasons. In 1991, Jordan accepted a deal. He admitted guilt in exchange for a life sentence with no chance of release and agreed to give up his right to future appeals. But later on, he argued that Mississippi law in 1976 didn't allow life without parole as a sentencing option. Courts agreed with him. They ruled that the deal was not valid and ordered a new sentencing hearing. In 1998, Jordan was sentenced once again to the highest penalty. Since then, he has continued to challenge different parts of his case through appeals. These included concerns about how the state carries out such penalties. His most recent appeal was denied in October 2024. On May 1, 2025, the Mississippi Supreme Court announced that Jordan's sentence was carried out on June 25, 2025. They stated that he had no more legal options left at the state or federal level.